I'm Denton Davidson for Gold Derby, here with Kathlyn Horan, director of the documentary The Return of Tanya Tucker, featuring Brandy Carlisle from Sony Pictures Classics. It follows the trailblazing country music legend's creative, captivating, and bumpy ride back to the top, and her newfound friendship with one of today's top recording artists. Kathlyn, this isn't your first music documentary, and you've worked with Brandy on a couple of projects before.
Yep.
Was she sort of your introduction into Tanya, or how was this project conceived?
It was Brandy's idea. It was kind of an interesting story. I'd known Brandy for about 15 years. I met her through other musicians, Indigo Girls. And then I did a couple projects with her, did a music video and a piece. She would go into a prison in Washington State and play for the women there. So I did a short doc piece on that in support of her foundation. And so we'd known each other. And then one Sunday morning, I got a text from her wife, Kathryn, that said, "You want to hear something crazy?" Which I did, of course. So I got on the phone with Brandy and Kathryn, and Brandy told me she had this opportunity to go in the studio with Tanya Tucker, who hadn't made a record in about 17 years. And she didn't know what to expect, didn't know if she was going to show up. She had some trepidation about it. And she knew that I was likely a fan. But she had talked to Rick Rubin, seeking his advice about working with a legend like he did with Johnny Cash, American Recordings. And among the things that he told her, one of the things he said was to make sure you document it. And so she said, "What do you think? Do you want to do this?" And of course, I said, "Absolutely. When do we start?" And she said, "Tomorrow." So I pulled together a crew. I just said, I think, give me an hour and I'll call you back. But yes, I'll do it. But just let me see if I can get my team together. And luckily, my DP, Jessica Young, was available. My friend Denise Plum, who came in to help in the field producing. And Fred Steuben, and great sound guy. It was the perfect people, were strangely available and very excited, with a lot of experience in the music doc realm. And so showed up the next morning and started rolling.
And we see that moment where Brandy's introduced to Tanya and she just drops to her knees. I love that part. It's a sort of a pinch me moment for her. Why was she so dedicated in bringing Tanya back to music?
I think a lot of what Brandy's interested in, and she continues to do this today, is she very much pays attention to the people that shaped her and formed her. Mm-hmm. And Tanya not only informed her musical style, because she was singing Tanya since she was, a kid. But she also informed, and she talks about this in the film, her toughness. And Tanya represented a different type of woman in country music that resonated with Brandy and with me, just as a fan as well, that she, presented herself in a different way. She didn't wear the kind of long frilly gowns and, wore pants and leather pants and, played a little bit with a rock edge with some of the stuff that she did with her Elvis influence style. And I think that all of that stuff resonated with her, just what informed who she is. And Brandy's an artist who's very aware of that. And also what often happens to women in music and country music is when you get to a certain age, you kind of get put on a shelf, and there's an interpretation that, you're not still viable and active. And I think part of that was she wanted to have folks to pay attention to their heroes. And Tanya's young, she started when she was 13 and she's just in her 60s. So she's got a whole life and career ahead. And so I think a combination of all of those things were what drew her to work with Tanya.
And Brandy made a really good point when she said something about how Dolly Parton came out just 5 years before, and she's seen as sort of this ultimate icon, and deservedly so. But Tanya was out just 5 years later, and she's, really just sort of ignored by a lot of people. She's not given the proper dues and respect in the industry that she really deserved. Do you think part of that was because she had sort of this wild reputation and she was drinking and that's the industry looks down on women doing that as opposed
Absolutely. I definitely think that's why, because she should be, along with Dolly and Loretta and Tammy, a household name. And to be clear, to a lot of folks, she is, right? And a lot of folks that are fans and true fans of country music do know Tanya and do hold her at that high esteem. But there is a kind of a larger group that is not yet aware. And that was part of Brandy's mission, you know, is to make sure more people are aware of her. But I mean, I definitely think that has everything to do with how she was perceived by the media, how she lived her life on her own terms, and she didn't adhere to the way in which a woman in country music was supposed to behave. And so her lifestyle, like as the tabloids, you know, paid a lot of attention to in the 70s and 80s, overshadowed her music, because she's got one of the most incredible voices, not just in country music, but in any music. And so that became more of the conversation than did her sound and her talent.
Right at the beginning of the film, we see Tanya heading in to do a show at the Troubadour, and she says, "Say a prayer, I need it." Did her humility, or I don't know if it's insecurity, surprise you at all?
I mean, what completely surprised me in that moment, she says, "Say a prayer, I need it." And then she whispers to herself as she's walking on stage, "All you got to do is sing." And she was saying that over and over. And I was completely shocked that someone who'd been performing for 50 years had this amount of stage fright and nerves, because you'd think that this is such old hat and she's been doing it for forever. And even in the 17 years where she wasn't making new original music, she was still performing. But I think every time for her is a struggle. And she's such a perfectionist that she's always worried about the sound. Is the band going to sound right? And so she puts so much pressure on herself, and she's an incredible entertainer and she loves her fans. And once she gets on stage, it's like nothing else. Like I remember the first time I saw her live and was just completely blown away, like one of the greatest performers there is. So, but to see her have to go through this cycle every time was like painful but she still pushed through it and she still does it. But it's like, my God, like that's so much. And there's one time in the film, not to jump ahead of your questions, but the one time in the film that she wasn't nervous before a show was when she played for Loretta's birthday. And it's actually probably the biggest event because it's all of the glitterati of Nashville, and everyone gathered there. And so you would think more pressure at the Bridgestone Arena. And she was very calm because Brandy was nervous. And so she took, like, they kind of have this mentor-mentee swapping relationship throughout the film. But that was the only time that I saw her not really fret at all and was just very happy and super, like, cool as a cucumber.
I was going to ask about that because she was late to rehearsal, I think, or something. And Brandy was about to pull her from the show. She was so nervous.
Yeah.
Why was Brandy so protective of her? I mean, she was hell-bent basically on not allowing Tanya to fail at this sort of relaunch of her career.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, you know, not just because Brandy invested so much in it, but there was this reputation because of all this stuff, the tabloids, and, you know, if Tanya was late for a show, you know, she would get a lot of flack about it. Of course, like if Willie or someone else is late for a show, then it's, you know, it's okay, you know, or it's a different interpretation. So I think Tanya also still got flack for acting like one of the boys, one of the outlaws, and keeps you on your toes and you're not sure what she's going to do. And so in that moment, Brandy was like, my God, you know, what am I going to do? But she also knew, as she said, like, I'm 90% sure that this is going to be fine. But Brandy's a very, as she explains, like, controlled person, and she likes to know exactly what's going to happen. And so that's why their relationship is actually really fun to watch, because she's put herself in this situation, I think, to push her boundaries and expand more, you know. And Tanya's manager at the time also was like, you know, she shows up and she's going to knock it out of the park, but we're just kind of going to be on our toes until that happens. And, you know, it does, but that tension is definitely was a moment of like, uh-oh, is something really going to happen here? And she shows up and does exactly like the consummate performer, knock it out of the park. But, you know, I think it's a constant thing still for Brandy, is like, you know, Tanya's not a media managed person in any way. She's just going to do what she thinks and feels. And so if you're wanting to be prepared and know exactly what's going to happen, that's going to cause you a little stress.
And we also see part of that in the studio as well, but it's Tanya who's not really, you know, confident in her vocals. And then just the first time she just spells it out, and Brandy's like, oh my God, like nobody else can believe it. But Tammy's like, it's okay. Like my voice is a little hoarse.
Yeah.
What was it like being in those studio recordings and sessions, just watching all of that take place?
I mean, it was amazing. And I've been in a lot of studio situations and they're all kind of incredible in their own way. But this one was special in particular because of the process. Like Tanya walked into an environment where in the past she had been recording to tape, and doing kind of one takes. She'd never have someone come and sit in the vocal booth with her and have to do, like she said, I think I did like 53 takes on that one line of that one song. And that's not a way that she'd recorded before. It's like the digital world and vocal comps and all that stuff. So she had a lot to step into in the process itself. But her voice, again, is like no other. And so as soon as she sings, it's like I got chill. Everybody in the crew was like, oh my God, I can't believe we're here and we're hearing this. And then as soon as, like you said, you hear her voice, then she stops and she's like, oh, that wasn't right. That wasn't good. I'm like, my God, how, like, I wish you could hear how we hear you. But to see, and that was our hope in putting this together, is like to make that creative process as interesting as it was for us in person, because it was like not just the exchange of Brandy and Tanya and working together, but watching them like Bring My Flowers Now, that song gets conceived from an idea all the way through the writing, through the course of the film. And so you really get to see the creative process and the way of collaboration can work, and a lot of storytelling and a little bit of tequila. And by day 2, I think we were all like, this is really going somewhere. Like, this is an undeniably beautiful record.
I love how much you see of the songwriting and the recording, because there's so many music documentaries that are just sort of salacious or talk about, personal lives, but you really get into the creative process. You also do have a lot of archival footage from not just various TV shows, but Tanya's own home videos. How did you obtain access to all of that? And then how long does that take to sort of rifle through so much? Because I mean, like we said, she's been around since the early 70s. So how do you decide what you want to include? And then how do you mine your way through all of that?
Yeah, so much of obviously the archival process started with our archival producers pulling stuff that was out there. And then we took a trip to Nashville and spent a couple of weeks there going through Tanya's basement, where she had boxes and boxes of her own personal archive. And like, you'd open a box and there would be like a People magazine and a photo of her as a kid playing guitar and her baby teeth. So it was quite a wide variety of stuff. But one of the things I was interested in was the Super 8 home movies that I had seen in a music video she did. So I knew they existed, and she thought they were lost somewhere, but I found them in a very back corner underneath all the boxes. Like the very last box I opened, there was this treasure trove of all the footage her father shot of her coming up. And so that became very much what informed a lot of the editorial process. Was we wanted this archival world to feel very much like the present day verite. And all in terms of the picking and choosing, obviously her life is, deserves like 20 different films, because it is so interesting. And I think because this year we started filming in January 2019 to January 2020, with the strength of what we had was this relationship with Brandy and Tanya, and Brandy bringing her hero back into the spotlight and following that journey as the bedrock of the film. And then the archive would serve to inform people like enough about Tanya's past to understand how important the present is. But it wasn't meant to be, to your point, it's not like a traditional biopic where you're going to go through everything in everyone's life. I'm a fan of films that are of their own construct, that make sense to the artists themselves. And Tanya is a very much, a hilarious and fun and forward moving kind of person. So I also wanted the film to feel like her. And so the mission for the archival was, what are these things we need to know, and how do we have them represented? And then also we've wanted to find ways that in scene we could make that trip through the archival process that made sense. So it was finding the balance between what are they talking about, how does this fit with that, and does it balance with what we need to know? And it's not just like, and let me tell you this now, and let me tell you this now. And so I think we found a balance in that journey. And I know a lot of folks would want to know more about her history. And I'm sure that, if the criticisms of the film will certainly be like, we didn't, get to know everything about Tanya, but that's not this film. This film is, you get enough information about her and you get these sort of intimate dream-like memories of hers is in the archival journey while staying very alive in the present day. Because it's very hard to cut away from Tanya Tucker. Like, she's so much fun to watch. Because there is a version of this film, it was like, maybe this is just verite. We don't have any archival, because it's like, yeah, she's such a joy to film.
Gold Derby, we're an awards coverage site, so we love our awards. So one of my favorite scenes is when you're actually filming her reaction to the Grammy nominations.
Yeah,
that's not something we get to see from a lot of artists. So and then of course you follow her to the Grammys, and she wins her first Grammy. It's incredible. Is that sort of how you knew the film was going to end, or how do you decide, this is where we're going to stop?
I think, well, I at least had in my mind that that's where we were going to end up very early on, just because it felt, like I said, but you can be very wrong about these things. But once she got the nominations, win or lose, I think that gave us a natural pathway of what was going to happen to bring it to a conclusion. And we had an arc, and it's, the goal wasn't necessarily the Grammy, she was just moving ahead and making music. And though she'd been, at that point, like fully nominations 14 times, and then she wins 2, and in a 50-year career. So it was amazing to have that, and amazing to see her get the validation from her peers in that way. But I think, and someone did ask me that, like, if she didn't win, what would you do? It was like, I'd just still be filming with her probably and making my producers mad. But I didn't have a plan otherwise.
Did you ultimately make the film you set out to make, or did it become something else while you were filming it?
It became, I think when I first stepped into it, I thought initially, it would be a film, and still is a film about Tanya, even though Brandy's in it. But I didn't know until kind of post studio, and they kept pushing forward, and all these things, these opportunities to continue to film this entire journey with her, not just entering the studio, but re-entering the world and all this stuff that goes along with the comeback. She hates the term comeback, so I will say the return of an artist to this to the business that she had stepped away from. And so I think once it became clear that we had that was happening, then that's when, rather than being a more traditional biopic, that we had this possibility to build something different that felt very intimate and real. And to me, like, what I like from these kind of films, portraits of people, are to get this intimacy and a deeper connection to someone. Like, I don't necessarily need to know all, like, tons of information, but I want to feel like I'm there, and I want to feel like I'm getting some depth. And she also, once I saw how vulnerable she was allowing us to catch, she never once said, step away and don't film. And she's very vulnerable and raw and real, that we were going to be able to have this, like, incredible fly on the wall. And so it definitely shifted once we saw what we were getting, and how compelling Tanya and Brandy's relationship was, but also Tanya's ability to just let us be with her at every moment.
Well, Kathlyn, thanks for chatting with Gold Derby about this, the Return of Tanya Tucker, featuring Brandy Carlisle. It's just such a fun, fantastic watch, and as the song says, you're bringing her flowers now. So congratulations on filming. Good luck with everything going forward.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.